Alright everyone, we'll start off today talking actually a second time with regards to Joe Biden's regime change comments. You know, he was giving his speech in Poland and insinuated, well more than insinuated, but we'll leave it at that, that Vladimir Putin should be ousted from power. The problem for propaganda purposes is that this justifies what Putin has said for more than a decade anyway, which is, hey look, I want to empower you, the Russian people, and the Americans hate you, and NATO wants to rip you apart, and that's why they're expanding. And the problem is when you say this in conjunction with the issue of Ukraine, that'll be endlessly used for propaganda. It'll be used for recruitment purposes. Just to be clear, none of the legacy media reports that I'll mention here actually say this. This will cause a surge in the number of Russians willing to join up in the war effort. So effectively you have just knocked back the capability of the Ukrainians to defend themselves. You have emboldened, maybe the nationalist element of Russian society. And again, most of the things that have been done both in the past by NATO, by Biden's admin, before that by Obama's admin. Trump did all right, but you can only repair so much when you don't have the will of Congress behind you till the last year of your presidency anyway. Anyway, a combination of those mistakes and the mistakes that have been made. Censorship has become a problem. Many mistakes are being made with regards to the situation. Really all it's doing is stymieing any effort at a peace agreement, or at least, a long-term ceasefire. That becomes less likely with this kind of rhetoric. Now, for the very first time, Joe Biden is actually being roundly drubbed even by his media allies. They have circled the wagon before on Afghanistan, on the economy, on the border, on, the dozens of other times that he said or done something completely off the chain, alienating allies, being disrespected. People won't even return his phone calls, including the Russians at this point, from the Pentagon. The legacy media, by and large, has refused to criticize Joe Biden, and when it has pulled punches. Now you've got, link in the description archived, of course, NBC. The other day you had CNN. Now you also have Salon. So you've got a broad spectrum. Think about what these different groups represent. Fox News is like the old guard conservative network. All the populist, libertarian-leaning networks, they hate Biden, so naturally they're firing at him on the topic of his regime change comments. But that was, that's a no-brainer. Same with Fox. NBC and CNN are neo-lib networks. So they're like the Biden Express sort of networks. They're criticizing him. And then you have the leftoid networks. Salon and some of these others are leftoid. They're separate from the neoliberal core of the Dem Party, and they're attacking him too. This leaves exactly no slice of the legacy or missing link media that isn't completely against what Joe Biden said. Another big problem is that Joe Biden's White House looked frenetic and terrified in the wake of him going off script, which is what he did when he said this, and went into immediate damage control mode, which is rather telling. This, out of desperation, they immediately got ahead of the news cycle and said, that's not what Joe Biden meant. He's just old and demented. He didn't know what he was saying. What he really meant was something else. Biden, though, the other day when press said, oh no, I don't walk back anything. I mean what I said. Oh, come on, man. Any reason? Nobody really thought that's what I meant. Well, then why are all your media allies attacking you? They're the most, we've got the most captive lapdog fucking media right now for the neoliberal WEF globalist bullshit shills, of which Biden is at least figurehead at the moment in the sense of the U.S., and even they are roundly and almost universally attacking him for it. So how did people really construe what you said, Joe? You think that no person actually construed it as a call for regime change. Then why are you getting attacked by left, right, and center at the same time, including by networks that you literally coordinate with? CNN bragged about the fact that at least on economic issues, they were coordinating their message with the White House to try to convince people the economy was better than it is. Unfortunately, we're fast approaching potential stagflationary conditions. Of course, if they were measuring inflation the way that it was measured in the 70s or the 80s, we'd already be pretty much there, other than, hey, the jobs market hasn't completely collapsed yet. Now, before I go further, because, this is telling. This is the sort of thing that really can potentially shoot him up in disapproval through his soft ceiling. He's been riding that line now for several months, and I analyzed that before, but I'll get into that a little bit as well. Keep in mind, if you're watching this video on YouTube, down below there will be a pinned comment with links to other video hosting sites that I use. Keep in mind that I make exclusive material every day on those platforms that does not get put on YouTube. Now, here's what I analyzed quite some time ago. And post so too, when these groups were saying there was going to be a Biden bounce, I chuckled because there would be some polling static for a couple of weeks, and then within a few months it would recede, and that happened. If you look at a line, a graphic visual of Joe Biden's polling over time, and you know anything about the concept of a line of best fit, you'll find that the paradigm has stalled out. His slow and inexplicable drop in approval and rise in disapproval, it's sort of going like this, eventually had to level out, because at some point you've exhausted people that aren't Dem partisans. They're never going to jump off support unless things get really, really, really dire. And it has to affect them personally. It can't be how you fucked up Afghanistan. Oh, you fucked up Ukraine. No, it has to be domestic. It's the economy, stupid. Inevitably, he would hit a ceiling of disapproval and a floor of approval. There's also the opposite. If the president's doing really well, it doesn't really matter. Things could be absolutely hunky-dory, like it's morning in America again. There will still be partisans and single-issue ideologues that disagree with you that'll never support you. I think the highest a president could potentially get, if they literally single-handedly saved an entire civilization or something, if the president put on a mech battle suit and got dropped in Ukraine and killed 10,000 Russian soldiers and sent them scattering and was immediately granted sainthood by the church and shit, they would still probably not be able to hit 70%. They'd be lucky to hit 60. That's the modern partisan thing. It's a double-edged sword because it means a lot of low-info voters, but it also means that you have to struggle to gain any real mandate. That can be helpful. It actually helps slow down government and therefore potentially authoritarianism. As we saw with Trump, unfortunately, it goes in the other direction and also slows down actual meaningful progress. But Biden, in this situation, is taking such a beating from so many sides because of the severity of what he said. And it's only 9 words. Think about this. Barely more than a year into his presidency, Biden has fucked up literally everything. Not a single instance of success. We've got inflation approaching the double-digit range, an open border that hasn't been solved. We've got social alienation. We've got now low labor force participation, multiple foreign policy disasters. Now even his friends are turning on him, at least temporarily, because he effectively pushed the world closer to a goddamn nuclear war. You cannot get worse. I'm seeing some, and these are not necessarily legacy media, but at least larger missing link media outlets, and not just the far right ones, claiming that he should be removed from office over this. Now, I said that immediately after seeing his statement. I'm like, you people are insane if you support this. There are actually people that do, including some Republicans. The old guard, shrinking minority of Republicans that cling to the antiquated, like Bush-Cheney thing, love this idea. Oh yeah, we need to have nuclear combat, toe-to-toe with the Ruskies, because they're living in like fantasy land. They think it's 1955 or something. They don't realize, I think, how big and how many nuclear weapons there are by how many parties and the adjacency of both bio and chemical weapons programs that a nuclear war or even just a general World War III in which there was nuclear restraint to the degree where mankind, if not hazarded in its existence, at the very least for a very long time, would be in recovery mode. There wouldn't be many advantages to having the kind of war that would be started by this kind of inflammatory rhetoric. I would go beyond calling it inflammatory. I would say batshit crazy. But the legacy media is still technically half-assing it by not insisting. What we should see, universal condemnation. We should see CNN calling for him to be 25th because he clearly is guilty of dereliction of his basic duty to uphold the Constitution and protect the people of America. You aren't protecting people by saying, let me justify 20 years of Russian propaganda by saying exactly the same thing that Putin has been saying. Because I'm an egotist and a moron, and I want to look tough. I want to look like I'm before the Brandenburg Gate or something. That's what Joe Biden is. He's got this nostalgia for the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and he wants to be JFK. The problem is that JFK wasn't pushing 80 years old and his mind wasn't riddled with dementia. Joe Biden's not JFK. Joe Biden's more like a dumber version of Buchanan. Or Jimmy Carter, if Jimmy Carter were considerably less honest and not a peacenik at times. That's what Joe Biden is, and I hate it. Because the legacy media finally comes out and again, it admits that he finally made a mistake, a significant one, that even when they tone it down, it's like, hey, you gotta back off here. I hate it, because every single one of these networks was gung-ho for Joe Biden. And they literally covered up real news, like Hunter Biden's laptop, etc., in order to get him honk duly elected in the last election. They were warned. Biden voters were warned, although they were being brainwashed by CNN and MSNBC and so forth. They were warned about what would happen if Joe Biden was elected. When Krugman and other idiots fake warned people in 2016's election, well, if Trump is elected, we'll have World War III and hyperinflation, a new depression, all these problems. All of those things were always more likely under Joe Biden for one single, really, really important purpose. Joe Biden is antiquated and incapable of carrying out his office. The problem is that when you have a steward instead of an actual leader in that executive role, you're going to get a cabal of other people that are pulling the strings. We've seen it before. We saw this with some of the very blustery rhetoric in the late 1980s. When Ronald Reagan clearly, towards the end, we're talking 85, 86, the second term Reagan, started developing obvious cognitive issues and was not the gipper that he was when he was running against Jimmy Carter. What was it known for? He had corporatists telling him it's time to cut the speech short and shit like that. He had people leaning over his shoulder, whispering into his ear how great you are. Hey, here's what you should do and why, taking advantage of the fact that he's nuts. He's demented. You couldn't do this with Trump. Even if Trump had dementia, I think he'd go and they'd have to use reverse psychology on him because he does the Big Don thing. Biden is still living in the 1960s in his head. Well, I'm going to take you behind the woodshed and do push-ups, fat, and stupid shit like that. We were warned. Everyone was warned. I warned about it. Other commentators warned about it. Hey, while it might be hilarious to have a vegetable as president, now's not really a great time for that. There's a lot going on in the world and you need someone who can actually lead. You need someone to actually be the chief executive who doesn't have a long track record of being a miserable fucking failure. And that's what Biden has been. He was a loser throughout his Senate career. He was a loser as vice president. He was basically Obama's court jester. And now he's the court jester of the entire Western world. The problem is that he keeps pressing, it's funny at first, but not when nuclear war potentially is looming. He keeps pressing the flush button and now we're just spiraling down the fucking toilet and wasting a lot of water in the meantime. Maybe that's why Salon no longer likes him so much. That's about all. Peace out.